So some background on our grazing research program out here at the Forage Cow-Calf Unit with the Livestock Forage Center of Excellence is we've done a lot of summer grazing research focusing on annual and perennial forages, but also a big part of our program is winter grazing research. And so we've looked at many systems. The question really has been about polycrop or cover crop grazing. And so this study is focusing on polycrops and how do they fit into a producer's winter grazing program.
This is a 2-year trial at the Termundi Research Ranch where we are comparing annual polycrop mixtures and barley swath grazing for soil health, animal grazing capacity, and then the cost of production of that system. So with spring 2019, we've officially wrapped up all parts of the polycrop study. After 2 years of studying annual polycrop mixtures, there's a few take-homes that I want producers to keep in mind. There is no silver bullet when you're looking at a feed grazing system. So if you're considering polycrops, you want to make sure that you look at weed infestations. If you've got a field that's particularly dirty and you're worried about being able to control those weeds, you might want to consider using a different field. Make sure that you always feed test. If you're including brassicas in that system, you're going to want to make sure that your sulfur levels aren't too high. And always check for nitrates, as those can be deleterious to cattle. And lastly, if you're looking at this as a soil health perspective or wanting to increase soil organic carbon, we found that you're able to increase the organic carbon in your system in areas that are already depleted. So looking at forage quality and the capacity for these systems to be able to graze cattle. We can compare cow days on the field. We also want to look at the quality. Is there enough energy in the feed? Is there enough fiber? Are we meeting the trace nutrients that these animals need in order to make it through the winter? Do we have to maybe supplement these annual polycrop mixtures a little bit differently than we would barley? Our polycrop had significantly higher levels of crude protein at that 14% due to the inclusion of the legumes and the brassicas that have higher protein levels than, say, a barley cereal would have. With that being said, the barley cereal at around 10% crude protein still met the requirements of that gestating beef animal. Knowing the levels of calcium and phosphorus in your feed is very important when you are including a mineral package. So you're going to want to test your feed and use the appropriate mineral to get that 2-to-1 mineral status for your animals by balancing your feed with your mineral program. When we're looking at forage quality, we also want to look at the deleterious factors, such as sulfur or nitrate content. The sulfur and the nitrate content in the polycrop were a lot higher than they were in that barley system. The sulfur content's a little bit higher because of the inclusions of the brassica in that polycrop mixture, and nitrates can really depend on the environment at the time of swathing. Over the 2 years, the barley out-yielded the polycrop. And there's a number of factors that might have played a role here. One significant issue that we ran into was weed pressure in the polycrop. Because in our barley, we are able to spray an in-crop herbicide, which we are unable to do in the polycrop, leading to significantly higher weed infestation and reducing the overall yield of that polycrop. When we are looking at forage utilization and dry matter intake, we saw higher values in the barley swath grazing system versus that polycrop swath grazing system. In year 1, this was majorly affected by environmental conditions. We saw a crusting over of ice and snow on those polycrop swaths due to a freezing and thawing cycle that we did not see in those barley swaths that were a lot more fluffy and bulkier. In year 2, the dry matter intake and the forage utilization was lower in the polycrop again, but this time it was due to 60% of that polycrop mixture being weeds on a dry matter basis. The polycrop costs more to produce on a crop production basis. In terms of the system that we seeded, we actually seeded our polycrop system twice. We underseeded the peas, and then we went back in and we overseeded the rest of the mixture. Whereas in the barley system, there was only one seeding pass. Another reason why the polycrop costed more to produce is that the seed can cost a lot more than traditional barley seed. We all know that a system needs to make money to make sense for a producer. A big portion of this study was that soil health aspect, or the soil organic carbon. Polycrops have the potential to increase soil organic carbon over a short period of time in areas of low carbon levels, such as lower soil depths and degraded upslope landscape locations. Increases in soil organic carbon are related to the higher root biomass inputs of that polycrop system compared to the barley system. Increases in carbon sequestration and soil organic matter are important as they play a role in soil quality, forage biomass yield, water quality, nutrient turnover, and maintaining soil structure. This can lead to overall increases in yield in these land systems.
This type of research is important for the forage and beef industries in Saskatchewan. Yes, polycrops, cover crops are important to fit into the whole dynamics of different types and alternatives for producers. Looking at some of the claims that are being made, this is long-term replicated work along with other studies that are looking at the different mixtures, the different species characteristics, and how do they all complement each other. This is just one example of the research ongoing at the Livestock and Forage Centre of Excellence.